but XYZ happened. Take XYZ with you and keep XYZ in your pocket, because that's going to be a tool that you will be able to use somehow down the line to help you along, to continue along the path of wherever it is that you're going. So from Tennessee, wonderful experiences. And that opportunity also unlocked more dialogue and conversation for Pat and I to relate so many similarities that she and I have had in our lives growing up. And then she and I dove even deeper into our relationship because of some shared experiences. So moving on from Tennessee, I was able to go to Xavier University to coach with Kevin McGuff, who is now at The Ohio State University coaching the women's basketball team. There, Sean Miller, Thad Matta was the men's coach at the time, and then Sean Miller became the men's coach. And then my husband at the time was coaching at Miami of Ohio with Charlie Coles. So this is the basketball circle that I'm hanging in on a daily basis. We're just hanging out. And these guys aren't who you or the media may think they are, because I don't know anything. I'm just some, young 25-year-old hanging out in the office and hanging in the office all day. You get there in the morning and you're there till the sun goes down, and you're having fun because you're all in the office getting to do what you've all wanted to do since you were a little kid. Since I was a little girl in the backseat of my car, and my dad said, I can get paid to coach basketball. So we're hanging and we're just having a good time, exchanging plays, exchanging ideas, talking about the strategies and the X's and O's. So the same thing at Tennessee, now even bigger and broader. And at Tennessee, it was the same. And the name list is endless, leading up to eventually comes back, but Buzz Peterson was at Tennessee. So hanging in the offices, this is what it's like. Now, obviously, it's a lot of work. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to do. There's high expectations. And sometimes to reap a big reward, there's a big cost. And so the business is not for everyone, because as you've seen, sometimes the axe chops the tree in one swoop, and sometimes it chops away a little bit at a time. But inevitably, most trees will fall down. So from Tennessee to Xavier was wonderful. We go from Xavier to Arizona, out in Tucson. It was beautiful. So many friends made in Tucson, and just the experience of Arizona Wildcats and the men's basketball program, it was magnificent. From Arizona to Indiana now. In Indiana is where Betsy and I reconnected from our first interactions together when I was in Cincinnati at Xavier. So Betsy and I are able to reconnect pretty quickly when we returned to Indiana, not only through Ball State, but like she mentioned, through the times that we were able to work together. So, and then from Indiana, now back in Cincinnati, I was able to spend some time in the WNBA with the Los Angeles Sparks, and the Chicago Sky in the WNBA as both the head coach and the general manager. A lot of experiences just piling in together to then create another tool in your tool bag for the next opportunities. So from the WNBA, I was able to, again, exchange and just spend a lot of time with several NBA coaches, because the coaching circle it is what it is. It's a nice camaraderie of minds who enjoy thinking about the same thing. The friends I've made in the NBA opened doors to me to come hang during my free agency. While hanging with the Pacers, one of them mentioned law school and kind of said it in passing. And I latched on and I took that to heart. Went to law school, graduated from the University of Dayton, and then now another tool in the tool bag to bring me to where I am today. What am I doing now? So now I do legacy planning. And what does that mean? It's a combination of all of that: the sports management, the strategic planning, the intermediary work, the analyst, and of course, the law degree using that with the estate planning. It's a lot of fun. There's a big intersection, as I'm sure all of you can see, with how all of that fits together. And that's one thing that you learn when you watch a team is getting all of the different pieces to fit together. That same rule applies to each one of our individual lives. We're all just the sum of a whole bunch of little pieces. And when you lay all those pieces on the table and you take a step back and see, okay, how can I fit all these pieces together? I think that's a good place for me to start. So that's where I started, and that's where I am.
Well, that's quite a journey right there. And if you would have ever thought that that little girl in the back seat would have a law degree, I mean, think about that, how special it is. Actually, I just saw Kevin McGuff this past weekend when I was at the Women's Final Four. I got to see him and say hi, and he looks good. And it was really eye-opening. I got to be on a panel when I was there at the Women's Final Four about Title IX. And it was specifically from women who were some of the founders, some of the first players in the Women's Professional Basketball League that came before ABL and WNBA and everything. And they were talking about the opportunities for Channel 9 from Title IX and how they got really their big chance, whether they played in high school. Some of them had opportunities to play in high school and play in grade school, but how Title IX really made an opportunity for them to play in college. And one was a star in Kansas, one was a star at UNLV. And I know that Lori Pirtle was is such an influence in both our lives, and how she was really in the forefront to make women's athletics, make women's basketball on an even keel with everything that was going on at UC. Were you at UC, and we were talking about this in the panel, were you at UC when they had the women's basketball game going on and they stopped it like in the fourth or the second half, or it was overtime? They stopped it and made them play in the auxiliary gym because the men's game was next. Do you remember that?
No.
That's a good thing that you don't remember it. I mean, it's a famous story that the women were playing, I think Miami of Ohio, and the game was running long and the men were standing in the corridor, in the tunnel, and the refs just came out and said, all right, girls, and I'm sure they said girls, all right, girls, you just got to finish your game somewhere else. What did Title IX mean to you and your opportunities? I think that we're past the 50th anniversary of Title IX, and Title IX gets challenged every once in a while. But what did Title IX mean to you and your opportunities to go to UC and to really, have this path that you have the connections at UC, and then you have the connections at Notre Dame and Tennessee and everything else that led you to where you are now?
Well, I'll say this goes way back. And when I say way back, I go way back in my mind. And I think of not so much myself, because I was young, I was very young, and I saw other girls in my town. And we were out in the country in Ohio, okay? We were out. There was one four-way stop and there was one blinking light that eventually became a three-way. And I saw older girls leaving and going to college. And girls that I would have never even imagined would even want to do that. I always wanted to go because I love to read, and I knew that the colleges had the biggest libraries. So I just wanted to go just to go enjoy the library. But I'm seeing girls go out and do things that really opened my mind to even the possibility of not only could I go to college to enjoy the library, but I could also play basketball too. Like, how much fun. And so I just saw it as an opportunity to keep having fun. It wasn't about something that I felt like was a right, other than the right to pursue happiness and the right to be able to pursue doing what you love to do. I'm a parent right now and I have 2 boys, and they can do anything. They do anything and everything. They do everything. And the concept of them being limited to not being able to enroll in something is just mind-boggling to me. My son, I'll tell you a funny story. So my son's out on the playground, and his very best friend in elementary school was a girl. And she played because, and he was no shame, and that was his best friend because she played sports and she was the best. And they knew if they were on the same team, they would win everything. So they became best friends, and they just took people's money. They played for money. It was a whole racket they ran on the whole school. And one day, one of the kids laughed because they said, "Why are you picking this was early on, why are you picking her first to be on the team?" Because LJ would always pick, he said, well, they said, "Why are you picking her first?" And he said, "Have you not seen Maya Moore? Have you not seen Brittany Griner? Do you know Diana Taurasi?" My son looked at this kid like, "What world do you live in? We're past that." And he just went on, and they kept playing the game and taking lunch money. So that's the impact of Title IX.
Well, props to your son for making money there. He's got a side hustle already when he was in grade school. So, and of course, we can expand on, what we just saw in the women's Final Four. But before we do that, anybody have any questions? You want to jump in? Questions? Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Thanks so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. What do you think is one piece of advice that you wish you knew when you began your coaching career? Because as you've talked about, coaching is a development act, and you're always learning as you go along, and you never start, you're always a different coach when you start than where you are today. So what is one piece of advice from a coaching standpoint that you wish you would have given yourself at the start?
Oh, great question, Jacob. Thank you. Thank you for that great question. So I'll say there's 2 things. One is there's 2 pieces of advice that are just unrefutable. One of them I got early on in my career, and so I was able to apply it. But the one that was missing, which is the one you asked of, that I did not really absorb until later in my career, when it was really taught to me in a way that I could understand it. And I will put an asterisk there, and this is important to Jacob's question, is a lot of things can be said, but are they said in the way, or a way, or one of the ways that the listener and the hearer can absorb it? And that is one of the arts of coaching. So this unique piece of advice that was given to me in a way that I could really absorb it was later in my career from Brian Agler. And Brian Agler is the coach that I got to work with at Los Angeles, with the Los Angeles Sparks. And just by me even saying one of the coaches I got to work with, that is a tribute to Brian Agler, because I used to say work for. And he made it very clear. He says, "You're not coming to work for me, you're coming to work with me." And every time I would say for, he would interrupt me, say with. And it was relentless. So here I am, and this goes back to, and this is why you have to start with perspectives, okay? Perspectives. Here I am being interrupted and corrected every time I say one little word. There's 2 ways to look at that. You could say he's nitpicking me. He's being rude. He's being disrespectful. He doesn't respect me. He's being condescending. If I was a man, he wouldn't interrupt me. You could go that route. Or you could say, he cares about me. He's known me my whole life. He's known my family. He's from Ohio. He's nurturing me. He's pouring into me. He's sharing wisdom with me. So I received it, adopted, and I'm applying, and I'm still applying the language worked with. So this piece of advice that Brian gave to me was explicit. So now we've seen his Jedi mind trick already on how he has a very a wise wisdom of Solomon way of imparting knowledge, right? Well, this other piece of advice, Jacob, that he gave, he expressed directly. And he said, it's about people. Nothing will happen and we won't win unless their souls, the people, are winning, not the player, but the person. So the player is going to show up. The player is going to play because they're professionals. But if we can get the person inside of that player to play with that player, we're going to win a championship. And we did. And I wear my I said Notre Dame ring. I wear my Los Angeles Sparks ring quite often. And I wear it out, and I wear it because it's not just about the game. We were a magical team, and there's stories, there's a whole nother slew of stories there, a whole vault of stories from Notre Dame and Xavier and Tennessee and LA and Chicago, just waiting, and Arizona, just waiting to be unlocked. But it means all of those rings mean something. And when you see anyone, there's stories there. If you see someone wearing a ring, if you're ever an oppressor and someone has a ring on, feel free to ask them about it. There's stories lying right there for days. And then when you win your rings, enjoy the stories behind all of those rings, all of those experiences. So thank you, Jacob.
That's a really good point. Any other questions we have real quick? Question? Any other questions? Amber, I would need to ask you about what we just saw this last weekend, and who would have thunk that the women's title game would have higher ratings than the men's title game. Now, one reason was that the men's title game, let's face it, it was on TBS, and you have to try to figure out where TBS is on your television. And it started late. I will be the first to admit that I didn't make it past halftime because it was past my bedtime. But the excitement and the eyeballs that are on women's basketball in particular and women's sports in general, I think that it is unprecedented. Give me your thoughts on what we just saw with the Caitlin Clark effect, and especially with the Final Four and the interest that really brought to women's basketball.
Wow. Well, I may start with talking about Dawn Staley. And when I was at Xavier, Dawn Staley was at Temple. And we got a chance to know each other on a different level now, not only as players, but now coaching staff. And when Dawn went from Temple to South Carolina, there was a lot of buzz in the coaching circle about that's interesting. Because at the time, South Carolina was the bottom of the SEC. And when I say the bottom, not just with the record, but the investment. They didn't seem to appear to care. And so what Coach Staley did was she set a tone, and she was not just being a trailblazer herself, but being vocal about, if they want to hire us, we must expect a higher standard. And we must show that if they provide a higher standard and provide a higher platform, we will be able to meet that expectation and then rise and exceed it. This was years ago. And so Dawn was ambitious to go to South Carolina, and she was able to get the entire contingent at South Carolina to buy into her vision and support it and fund it. Because whether we're talking about nonprofit organization, nonprofit work, sports, personal affairs, business ventures, everything in this time, space, reality that we're in right now in this country needs to be funded with US currency, period. And there's no going around it. We can talk about intrinsic value and joy all we want, but that draws a line at some point. And so what she's been able to do from look at their partnerships, look at the business structure and the endorsements that are coming. It's a whole enterprise. And in addition to being the general manager of the South Carolina Gamecock enterprise, the president of that enterprise, and then in addition to being the general manager of the entire contingent of roster of not just players, but extended staff, administrative staff, support staff, and be the head coach. We're talking about 3 executive positions on one staff, on one extremely profitable enterprise, not only profitable to the university, but also profitable to the entire state of South Carolina. And then when you look at tourism dollars and the industry, in addition to profitable for the television industry, in addition to profitable for the sports and Under Armour specifically, in addition to profitable for on and on and on and on. So it shows when you buy in, the benefits are boundless. And not just, we're talking about intrinsic joy, but the financial gain. There is money on the table to be made. Somebody's going to go make that money. And there's strategy and ways to attack it and to do it. So you can not only have the joy and the wins and the championships, but also have good business deals along the way. And when you look at the weekend, that's what stands out to me, Betsy, is not only is it joyous, but it's profitable.
And I think that that's going to make the difference with women's sports, women's basketball. People are not going to televise it just out of the goodness of their hearts. They're looking to make money. And now they can see that you can make money off of it. And talking about Dawn Staley, and you were talking about the rings, I'm sure you saw the article. They said that, the practice players, every team has practice players, and all the practice players, all the guys also will get a championship ring. And she did that 2 years ago, and she's doing it now because, as you know, how important they are to building a winning team. And so she's giving those rings to practice players. And second of all, if the University of Kentucky, in my opinion, wants to make a really big splash, they would hire Dawn Staley and she would win. I know that ain't going to happen, but wouldn't it be a statement that they would do that? So I want to open it up one more time for questions before we get going. Yeah, go ahead, Jan.
Hi, so nice to talk to you. Thank you for joining our class today. So I kind of had like a 2-part question. So I was super interested in learning about more of what you do now. You mentioned the legacy planning, and then kind of when you were talking about the opportunities that you saw and finding courage and strength and seeing people that looked like you in spaces that you hope to work in, especially in sports. I work in football recruiting here, and my new boss is our first African-American director of recruiting. So kind of how do you find ways to support people in those positions? And how did you find that courage to be able to step up? And what do you do if you're that person who's doing something for the first time?
Great, thank you, Shannon. I will say that because of the time that I grew up in, it wasn't so much seeing people that look like me in spaces. That was never a point of interest or a point of focus for me. It was more of when I saw the women not only were they women, but they were women who were interested in what I was interested in. And so it's seeing and being connected with people who resonate with you on some level, whatever that level may be. But it's the resonation, because we can have people that may look similar to us, but there's no connection, there's no resonance. And so that's why for each one of us, it's important that we shine our own unique gift, because somebody needs to see our resonation. What is it about each one of us that is that unique spark, that unique thing that you just love? I have a friend named Ashley who is super, super country, right? And she wouldn't mind me saying that. She just is. She can't help it. And I know nothing about horses, nothing at all. She loves horses. They moved where they live just so that they could be backed up to a horse farm. And her daughter has horses and they have horses, and it's a whole thing. So when I go visit Ashley, I have to understand, I have to learn how to speak her language, which is a language that speaks to horses. It's a whole another vibe. And I feel blessed that Ashley's letting me see that part of her, because who would have known years later that I would have a family member with special needs who has horse therapy. And I'm able to tap in and resonate with him in that way because of the experience of someone else just letting their own uniqueness be seen. And so that's what I find so magical about this path that we're on, is because of television, because of the platform that sports gives, it allows so many unique lights to be seen by the masses. And especially kids can look up and see that unique resonance of that person. So Shannon, that's what I really enjoy about that. Now, there was 2 layers to your question. What was the other layer, Shannon? Because I want to make sure I get it completely roundly answered.
Yeah, the first part of my question that I asked was just kind of what do you find like special about your job that you do today? Like where you mentioned that you do legacy planning. I've just never heard of that before. So I was just interested to know what it is that you do, and how that transition was like from working with the players and then now working more in the organization.
So from working with the players to working in the organization, that transition really came when you in Chicago, when I became the GM and the head coach. So you're with the players, but it's a different type of with the players than as an assistant coach. So that experience then allows you to transition to another level of separation from the players. So there's levels and layers to it, and each one progressively brings the adjustments that go along with it. How's that transitioned now into legacy management, which I coined that myself, because as I'm with players now in this phase, and I love that question, Shannon, because in this phase, we spend a lot of time talking about their legacy. And I have one client who is 13 and already thinking about her legacy and what mark does she want to make in her sport. She's a tennis star. And who does she want to follow? And how does she want to carry on the legacy of Venus and Serena? How does she want to carry on the legacy of Althea Gibson? So she's thinking about this at her young age. And I feel so privileged and blessed to be able to work with her and her trainers and marketing and just putting together just a dynamic team around her for not only her sport management, not only her representation and the coaching side of it, but then now also, Shannon, her legacy as she wants to leave her mark moving forward.
I love that. I feel like that's a more beautiful way to put like NIL kind of stuff. It almost feels like you're going one step further, not just thinking about what, you know, your name is, your image, your likeness, but kind of thinking of what more you can bring to the table. So I love that. Thank you so much for answering.
No, thank you for the question.